there's an American general whose remarks, caused an uproar. And let's just go through this piece from The Guardian. So a leaked memo from a U.S. four-star general. Remember, a four-star general, this is way up there. We're talking, top brass. Saying that his gut told him the United States would be at war with China in 2025. This has prompted warnings about the danger of quote-unquote undisciplined predictions of a Taiwan Strait conflict. The memo by the head of the United States Air Mobility Command, AMC, General Mike Minahan, was the latest prediction of a Chinese military invasion of Taiwan, which have ranged from 2022 to 2049. What does that even mean, a Chinese invasion of Taiwan? How the fuck do you invade your own country? This is literally a bunch of, pencil pushers gathering around a table in Whitehall or Foggy Bottom and saying like, well, that's not China. Who the fuck asked you if it's China? No one asked you. No one asked you whether it's part of China or it's not part of China. Look, man, the United States officially has a one China policy, so it doesn't even recognize Taiwan as the real China. Okay, so this is a very weird situation going on here. But anyway, it's so stupid. It's like you can't invade your own country. It has triggered a debate about U.S. readiness. Readiness for what? Again, what is this like? What? Why do you have to be ready for this? What do you have to do with this region? Why can't you just leave it alone? You don't have to be ready for anything. Mind your own business. Accusations of warmongering. Well, yeah, that's sensible. That's the most sensible thing I've read here. And accurate. And concerns about desensitizing people to the real risk of invasion. Again, the only people invading are Americans and Australians and British. Okay, let's get that straight. China's government claims Taiwan as a province. No, it doesn't. The whole fucking world recognizes Taiwan as a province. The United States is the one China policy. Now, I know people are going to say, well, no, they don't explicitly say in there that Taiwan is part of China. Yeah, they did, because they cut off relations with Taiwan in the sense that they stopped recognizing it as the real China. And then, during the 70s, they shifted to, okay, Beijing is actually China, so God, I hate this arrogance. I really hate this so much. So they say China's government claims Taiwan as a province and its authoritarian leader. Again, who the fuck asked you if he's authoritarian? I mean, by whose measure is he authoritarian? Why can't you just say China's leader? Why can't, like, how is this objective? It's not objective. I know they like to say, well, Western press is very objective. No, they're fucking not. This is half a sentence. I haven't even finished the sentence, and there's already several things in there where they're questioning China's territorial integrity. They're questioning the president of the country. Dude, I mean, we're not here to focus on him anyway. So if you want to say he's authoritarian, like, do a whole thing about that, but you don't have to put it in here. It's irrelevant. We're talking about a U.S. general. Xi Jinping, the apparently authoritarian leader, is set on what he terms reunification by force if necessary. It is a prospect Taiwan's government and people vehemently reject. Around this impasse, tensions are escalating. Beijing's military is growing bigger and is increasing its coercive targeting and harassment of Taiwan. No, Beijing's military is growing bigger because the United States, the United Kingdom, and Australia got together and decided it would be good to make a military alliance for no reason, just China just happens to be there in the Indo-Pacific, and provoke the Chinese a little. Minahan wrote, "I hope I'm wrong. My gut tells me we will fight in 2025. Xi's team, reason, and opportunity are all aligned for 2025." This is really funny, honestly. It's like there's gonna be a war, not because of me, but because of him. How do you come to this conclusion? Did Xi Jinping say he wants to invade the United States? Did he say he wants to attack the United States? Forget the balloon, please. Let's be serious. Did he make any threats to the United States? Why when he says we will fight? Why? No one asked you to fight. You don't have to fight. This is ironically creating the conditions for one. Minahan's jingoistic 9-point plan set out his preparation for the next fight. Dated 1st of February, but leaked on social media days before, it ordered increased training and integration of the AMC and joint forces to deter and, if required, defeat China. Jesus Christ, these people don't stop, man. Like, what do you mean defeat China? We're not talking about Nazi Germany, okay? What do you think you're going to defeat China with? Are you just going to invade that goddamn country with 1 billion people and just, install a new government or carve it up or something? Well, what is this lunacy? What is this arrogance? Defeat China. It's not required to defeat China unless China drops a nuke on you or attacks you. Jesus. These people are crazy. They're fucking nuts. Timelines within the decade are usually about China's capability. The Director General of Taiwan's National Security Bureau and its defense minister have said China would reach full invasion capability by respectively 2023 and 2025. Full invasion capability. Jesus, man, these guys are funny. They're really funny. They want to say China's a threat, but then actually not really. It's not a threat yet, but it's coming, right? It's this China rising. They try to like drum this into your heads with video games, Battlefield 4, China rising. Oh, beware of the rising Chinaman. Like again, it's like this demonization. Like they're these cunning characters who are just like running around and they can't wait to pounce on you. Boring, so boring, man. I swear. Later dates are often based on China's intention, picking years with symbolic significance for the Chinese Communist Party. Yeah, they're gonna pick Lenin's grandmother's cousin's birthday and invade on that day. I promise you, it's coming. But it is not always clear. The U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, said last year that China was determined to annex Taiwan on a much faster timeline, but did not give a date. Dude, you can't annex your own country. It just doesn't work that way. You can't say these words. You can't say them. No. You can't say them, man. Listen, if we're going to talk about this, let's talk about Puerto Rico. Because in Puerto Rico, I mean, it's what is it? It's basically a U.S. colony, right? It's basically a U.S. colony. They ain't got statehood. You remember when they were in great need of disaster relief. They just hung them out to dry. They just left them there. They want to have control over Marshall Islands, over Puerto Rico, but they want to be they want to claim to be the representatives of these territories, but when it comes to actually helping them as the representatives, as the government should, they don't do it. When it comes to giving them representation, real representation, they don't give it to them. So, why don't we talk about, let's talk about this. Let's use this language and apply that to the Puerto Rico scenario. Because, listen, man, China has a lot more legitimacy to invade and annex Taiwan, as you say, as you use this language, than the United States does being in Puerto Rico, being in the Marshall Islands. I mean, based on what authority? You don't even treat those guys like equal citizens. Minahan's prediction was quickly linked to statements in 2021 by then head of the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, Adam Philip Davidson, to a Senate committee hearing in what is now referred to as the Davidson window. The admiral said he believed the Chinese threat to Taiwan would manifest in the next 6 years by 2027. Man, each one of these motherfuckers, do they have a crystal ball in their offices or something? Each one of them is making predictions about what's going to happen. What is this, is this a circus? This week, Davidson repeated his comments, saying that his conflict scenario included smaller assaults on outlying islands. Davidson, who is in Taiwan meeting the president and other defense figures, declined an interview request. So again, do you see how provocative this is? Because imagine if the Chinese were sending, pick anyone you like. It could be, again, a general. It could be, a member of the Chinese Communist Party. It could be someone from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Any Chinese official. Can you imagine if they were sending a Chinese official to the Marshall Islands or to Puerto Rico? I mean, just to stir crap, like just to provoke them. What do you think the American response would be? Don't you think the Americans would be very pissed off? I mean, if I were in the White House or I were in Foggy Bottom, I'd be pissed off. Yeah. But if I were also in the Chinese shoes, I'd also be pissed off at this because you're provoking them. You're sending military officials. You're sending people like Nancy Pelosi, right? So she used to be Speaker of the House. You're sending very high-level government officials to a territory that is viewed as part of China, and you're basically threatening them. This is a threat. I'm sorry. It's very, very insulting, and you're stirring shit. And it's funny because, the Chinese, if you're worried about them invading Taiwan, quote unquote, you're actually going to make sure they fucking do this because they're going to get sick and tired of you doing this kind of crap. So it's a catch-22, all right? It's a catch-22. But this is how it goes. In Syria, John McCain was crossing the border illegally. You know, Republicans, they love to fucking whine about, oh, illegals coming into our border. But it's fine to cross Syria's border and go in Syria illegally if you're a U.S. senator, right? Apparently laws don't apply to you if you're a U.S. senator. You're fucking God or something. So, you know, they go into northern Syria and take photographs with Al-Qaeda and give them weapons and shit to overthrow governments. That's fucking fine, right? They always have this arrogance about them, right? And it's so bold and insulting. People get sick of that shit. And I'm pretty sure the Chinese are going to get sick of that too. So Minahan's memo was written off by many analysts as offering no evidence beyond his gut and crude assessments that 2024 elections in the US and Taiwan were good timing for an invasion. So the most charitable interpretation of Minahan's comments was that he was aiming them at his own organization to spark change, said Blake Hertzinger, who's a non-resident fellow at the American Enterprise Institute think tank. God, I love these CIA names. They're so fucking good. The part that doesn't make sense is releasing a memo with this sort of inflammatory language, unclassified, basically guaranteeing it would leak. So do you know what's funny? Again, it's like, this kind of reminds me, you know, let me pick a recent analogy, which is Prince Harry, right? It was like, they're not mad at him for killing 25 people in Afghanistan. They're just mad that he admitted it. And this is the same kind of vibe that you're seeing here generally. I'm not just referring to this quote. I'm speaking generally. That people are not mad that, you know, Minahan is kind of stoking, he's stoking resentment and you know, making the Chinese do a double take. So what the fuck is he talking about? What? There's going to be a war? You want war? Putting them on alert. They're just mad that he's saying it so bluntly. And this is, I mean, you could remember Trump, right? Trump was also kind of like, they didn't disagree with what he was doing or what he was saying. They just disagree with him saying it so bluntly because he's a big mouth. This, you know, I don't know. It's good in an analogy, if I may say so. I don't know if you guys would agree with me. Let me know. Right now we're live or in the comments. But don't you agree that this is kind of the same attitude? It's like, we want war with China, and we want to make sure that Taiwan is not China. But don't say it like that, okay? Because we need to frame the Chinese as the ones being aggressive, okay? So just shh. See, this is a quote here. This is from someone who's on Voice of America. So Michael O'Hanlon. He says, quote, very unwise and potentially dangerous because of the potential for creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. Bingo. That's what I'm talking about. At least I think that's what he means. I don't know if he means self-fulfilling prophecy that the Chinese are going to invade Taiwan. Again, I can't grapple with this sentence, or that it's provoking a conflict, because yes, in the latter it certainly is. Some analysts accuse the military figures of putting forward short timelines to lobby for more funding. Hey man, you got to give us fucking time to start this war, man. We need to bribe more people. Don't you fucking get it? This is so funny, God, I swear. This is really funny. The Wall Street Journal editorial board was among those defending the memo, saying it offered an important point outside its rhetoric, that the United States is not ready for conflict and people should be more worried about it. Yeah. Why should you be ready for conflict? Why? Here's the quote. This is typical thinking in the US military or in all military organizations, that the preparation of wars with potential challengers or opponents is a must, says Huang Kuibo, a professor of diplomacy at Tsinghua University in Taipei. But the writing and leaking of the memo has raised questions about how the current thinking of senior US military figures was diverging from that of US policymakers who are balancing a challenging but non-adversarial diplomatic relationship with China. Well, Jesus, I'd like to know who they are, because I don't know many of them. Right, I'd love to know who are these U.S. policymakers who are trying to, engage in diplomacy with the Chinese. By all means, tell me. The Pentagon has distanced itself from Minahan's memo, saying it was not representative of the department's view. The U.S. is a long-standing integral party to cross-strait tensions, Jesus, as a global military power and as a legally bound supporter of Taiwan's defense capability. Its cross-strait policy remains underpinned by a doctrine of strategic ambiguity, a refusal to confirm whether or not it would come to Taiwan's aid in the event of hostilities. Minahan's memo raised the suggestion that some in the US military were acting on an unambiguous assumption or understanding that it would. So do you understand what this means? Basically, the United States has not made it clear whether it's actually going to come to Taiwan's aid in the event of a quote-unquote Chinese invasion. Now, again, that doesn't mean they don't have security agreements with Taiwan, because they do. If you go, just look at a Taiwanese soldier, right? American gear, American weapons as usual, right? Like everywhere the United States go, whether it's Iraq, it's Afghanistan, it's wherever, they just like try to, sell as much of their shit and flog all their military gear to the troops there. So that's why you see Afghan soldiers wearing American equipment, right? Or Iraqi wearing American equipment. It's just money, man. It's a fucking business, right? It's a business. I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, but I still think it's noteworthy, right? It's still something you should keep in mind, because if you're dressed in U.S. gear, military gear, I mean, how independent is your military? Let's put it that way. Chinese officials responded to Medhurst's memo by warning the United States against inflaming tensions. On Wednesday and Thursday, the CCP's military sent more than 60 warplanes and ships into Taiwan's air defense identification zone, but it was not clear whether this larger than usual incursion was in retaliation to Medhurst or another perceived provocation. No, I think it's the memo. Don't you guys think it is? Because, when Nancy Pelosi came, they put on what is called a show of force. Now, again, let's be very careful with this term show of force, because it has different meanings depending on where you are in the world. The United States idea of a show of force is to fly nuclear fucking bombers on Iran's border, which is on the other side of the planet. That's just provocation. That's not a show of force. This, China, in its own on its own territory and airspace, flying a bunch of its military aircraft is not a provocation. It's a show of force, and it's like back off. That's what it means. In Taiwan, the memo received a modest level of coverage, featuring in news bulletins and political talk shows, but with far less alarmism than it got overseas. I'll get to that in a second, but here they say Taiwan's government is urgently working to fix entrenched issues with its own military and foster urgency in a population that has lived with the China threat for decades. The China threat. Communist threat, they're coming for you. They're hiding under your bed with a communist manifesto. So, conscription for young men was recently increased to a full year of training and service, and the voluntary reserve service is being expanded to include women. During a busy weekday lunchtime in Taipei, the Guardian struggled to find many people who had heard of the leaked memo. A couple in their 60s who ran a project. Okay, I mean, is this really interesting? Listen, man, let me get something. I really, no offense, man, but you're going a bit off tangent here. This is a good one, man. This is a good quote. This is what I'll tell you. The produce guys, the couple, are saying that always say China will attack us. That's what Taiwan's political parties, right? They say always say China will attack us. I'll fight them. I'm not afraid. A 26-year-old IT worker, on the other hand, said he was sick of the bullshit posturing and accused the United States of playing chess for power in Asia. Yes, well, I have a very promising conclusion to deliver to you. This IT worker is fucking switched on. That's exactly what's going on. Again, anytime, let me break this down very simply. Anytime you're wondering what's going on with U.S. foreign policy, just literally take a globe or a map and just try to look where the fuck you are talking about in relation to the United States. If it's outside the United States, and remember, the United States is a state continent, literally a state continent, isolated by the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. So, I mean, unless it has problems with Mexico and Canada, which it doesn't, not in the same manner in any case, it doesn't have any reason to be in these areas. It doesn't have any reason to be, stirring up shit in Europe or in China or Southeast Asia or in India or the Middle East. It just doesn't. It doesn't. That's not defense. It's not productive. It's offensive, it's aggressive, and you're going to piss off the people in that region because they don't like, Uncle Sam trotting along and, putting down, putting his boot on their necks and ordering them around. And this is typical bullshit that the United States does. And again, when I say US, I mean Britain as well. Same thing, really. They come in, and try to stoke divisions and try to provoke sectarianism. Like they'll try to, in Iraq, they'll say, oh, well, look, the Sunnis hate the Shias and the Shias hate the Sunnis. And then they might take something that is maybe a fraction of a truth and then blow it up and make sure it happens, right? They'll make sure it escalates and turns into a bloodbath like they did in Iraq, right? And then they try to do the same thing with Hong Kong. They try to do the same thing with the Uyghurs, right? And then they try to do the same thing with Tibet, and now the same thing with Taiwan. So they have different areas where they're trying to fuck with the Chinese and stoke internal divisions. So, it doesn't mean China's perfect and there's nothing to talk about and everything is fine in Taiwan and Hong Kong, etc., etc. But this is all of these issues are immensely exaggerated, and they're exaggerated on purpose so they can cause internal strife, right? It's just divide and conquer. That's really what it is. Yeah. So in Syria, it's also the same thing with the Kurds. So the United States will come in and pretend to be with the Kurds, and then they actually screw them and put a knife in their back, like they did 2019, right? And they try to like pit, different groups of people against each other, right? So they'll go and give weapons and arms to Al-Qaeda. So Al-Qaeda goes and kills Muslims and other Muslims and Christians and minorities. And then they'll also, they'll go and back the Israelis so they can also come in and help with Al-Qaeda and bomb Syria and cause chaos on that front. And then they'll go and be with the Kurds and steal the oil and give them weapons and pretend they care about them. And it's just divide and conquer over and over and over again. So you always got to pay attention to this strategy. Now, regarding Taiwan, again, I think that they have no authority to be talking about this issue because they have a one China policy. It's been steady for decades. Stick to that and stop escalating things. The only ones that are escalating are the Americans, because in the last year they've changed the writing on the State Department's website. The State Department was very clear, and they changed the language, and the Chinese noticed because it was about China and Taiwan, and it made it. Again, I'm paraphrasing. I don't have the exact quote, but we covered it on the channel, so you can go look up the video. It was very clear how the United States abided by the one China policy and respected it. And then they changed the language to make it seem like they do, but it's not really, you don't really know for sure where they stand, right? This ambiguous nonsense. And of course, that puts the Chinese on alert. And you've seen this trade war with China, this embargo on Chinese products because they're good, whether it's TikTok, whether it's Huawei, they're just jealous. Accusing the Chinese of spyware all the time. The balloon is really just the latest iteration of that. But again, we just talked about that as a separate issue. But and AUKUS is another one. You can really see they're just trying to drum up support to fuck with China. Taiwan is not the point. They don't care about Taiwan, just like they don't care about Ukraine, just like they don't care about people in Iraq and Afghanistan. There's always a play. It's just a play, right? Democracy, freedom, Taiwan, Donbass. They got protect the Ukrainians against the evil Russian green men in the Donbass. This is a PR ploy that they are using to justify the same result. What is it? Military-industrial complex, making record profits, selling more weapons to be used against these countries, whether it's China, whether it's Russia, whether it's pick whatever country in the Middle East. This is business. This is the same business model over and over and over again. They don't give a shit about people in Taiwan. They don't give a shit about people in Hong Kong. They don't care about the Kurds. They don't care about nobody. They just don't give a crap. And I'll just give you I'll give you one example. I heard this from someone who does not like China, okay, who's from Taiwan. Who's lobbying on behalf of Tibet, and for decades and decades and decades, he talked about how difficult it was to get the Americans to give a shit about what's happening in Tibet and to kind of oppose the Chinese on that front, and they just wouldn't care, right? So you go and sit down with these American politicians, and then they just kind of ask like, "What's in it for me?" That's it. That's all they care about in the conversation. And now, in recent years, they finally care because it's become necessary to care because of China becoming so big. BRICS country, large military, economic powerhouse, overtaking the United States to become the world's #1 economy, sooner rather than later. That's why they care, quote unquote. So please keep this in mind because, they're always going to find some excuse, but it's always exaggerated. It's not legitimate, and it doesn't justify the ultimate goal. And this memo it's just the latest iteration of that. I didn't need Minahan's goddamn memo to know this and to explain this to you. We're seeing this every single day. And by the way, in Australia, I don't know how closely you guys follow Australian politics. I certainly do, and I try to always tell you what's going on there in terms of major of it. The Americans have a base in Pine Gap in Australia, which is an immense spy station that's used globally. Just to kind of embody. Just to kind of show you how emblematic it is of U.S. rule in Australia. There's a room in there where the Americans are only allowed in, and the Australians are not. So, because it's supposed to be a spy base that they run together, right? It's not an embassy or something like that. and there's a room where only the Americans are allowed to go in, even though it's in Australia. So that kind of shows you, like, you know, the hierarchy. And then, of course, Americans have access to Australian bases, like where the Australians train their military. The Americans can go into some of those bases. The Americans have airfields there. They have a huge, huge military presence. Why? Because Australia is right opposite China. So it's you know, it's nicknamed an unsinkable aircraft carrier. An American unsinkable aircraft carrier, because it's just a giant piece of land with American forces on there. And of course, AUKUS is kind of like the latest, you know, demonstration that of the direction it's heading in. And you can see there's so much division between the Chinese and Australians, which has been encouraged by the United States. You know, China and Australia, major trading partners. China used to be Australia's #1 trading partner, and they've completely destroyed that relationship. And you know, this is great because they need the Australians to also the Australian public to go along with this and view China as an enemy. So this worries me. Not this memo, but all of these things I mentioned. This worries me because you can see how fucking crazy the situation is in Ukraine, how it just escalated out of control. You know, and it's so avoidable. All these people who died, all these people who have been displaced, all these refugees, all this destruction, the economic hardship in and outside of Ukraine. This is so unnecessary. This is so dumb and futile, and it could have been avoided with diplomacy. But they just, you know, they don't want to go. They don't want diplomacy. They don't want to hear anything about it. They want war with China. There are a lot of people in Washington, D.C. and in Whitehall who want war with China. They're only mad about this memo because, you know, they want it they want you to think it's about human rights. It's not. It's about military-industrial complex, U.S. imperialism, and hegemony. Don't forget this, because these are the times we're living in. This is the situation at hand.